This episode of Ramblin Hudson Valley is sponsored by The Warehouse, located on 119 Liberty Street in Newburgh, New York, celebrating its 10th year this year. The Warehouse has awesome burger as well as vegan and vegetarian dishes, lots of local craft brews, a full-service bar, and a lot of history thrown in. Check them out today. So here we are today in the Newburgh Brewing Company. I'm joined today by Paul Halyako. He is the president of the Newburgh Brewing Company, along with two of his partners as well, both his brewmeister and his sales individual, which he'll introduce in a moment. But today we're sitting in the brew hall of the Newburgh Brewing Company, an amazing establishment itself. You guys have been in business since 2012, but it would be unfair for me to go ahead and tell your story. So, Paul, tell a little bit about Newburgh Brewing Company.
So, as you mentioned, and thanks for having us on, and thanks for spotlighting our business. We really appreciate it, and we just appreciate any spotlight on any business in Newburgh, really. We've been open since 2012. We actually started planning the brewery back in 2010. So myself and my main business partner, Christopher Basso, we went to high school together at Waterfront High School, so we're local guys. We actually went to college together at Boston University, and then our careers split. We never stopped being friends, but our careers split. So Christopher went into the culinary world. He went to the French Culinary Institute, and then he worked as a chef in Manhattan. I went into the world of accounting and finance. I became a CPA. And at a certain point in Christopher's culinary career, he really developed a passion for brewing, and he got a part-time job at the Brooklyn Brewery, which then quickly developed into a full-time job. So he was a brewer at the Brooklyn Brewery for almost 7 years. He started thinking about wanting to have his own brewery, and not just have a brewery where he grew up. Mm-hmm. So he became obsessed and fascinated with opening a brewery in Newburgh, which is in part because of just the overall mystique and the historic nature of this great city, but also very logistically it made a lot of sense. There was no other local breweries really. The closest to us at that time were Captain Lawrence in Westchester and Keegan Ales in Kingston. So there was a genuine void for a local brewery in this market. And also just for a company that's a manufacturing facility first and foremost. Newburgh is a great place to do business because you're at the intersection of 84 and 87, so it makes trucking very, very easy. You mentioned that we're here in our beer hall, which we call our tap room, and that same intersection of 84 and 87 is great for tourism too. It's very, very easy to get here. He'd started developing this idea of opening a brewery in Newburgh. He approached me, asked if I'd be interested in coming on board to run more of the overall business operations. I jumped at the chance. I thought it was a great opportunity, and we bought the building here in January of 2011. We brought on our head of sales, who's also a co-owner, Charlie Benedetti, and then we started construction on the building in the fall of 2011, and we opened in April of 2012, so it'll be almost 7 years.
What was this facility prior to being a brew hall?
Sure. So the building was built in the 1850s. It was originally part of the William Wright Steam Works, so there were steam engines built here. His engines were most notably used by the Union Army during the Civil War. It powered the naval gunships that patrolled the Hudson River. They were used in construction projects such as the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. And the only William Wright engine still in existence belongs to Jay Leno. It's on one of his antique cars. It's his steam engine car. It was very briefly a yarn factory in the 1890s. And then what most longtime Newburgh natives remember it as was the Newburgh Paper Box Company, because they were here from about 1915 till early 1980s. So we've actually had former paper box employees come to the brewery to take a tour, which is very cool. The building sat vacant from the mid-80s until we bought it. So it was never abandoned the way, unfortunately, so many buildings in Newburgh have been. It was always privately owned. It's just that no one had found a great use for it. We were able to come in, buy it from the previous owners with the idea that we want to make it a brewery, of course. Construction started in the fall of 2011. The building is 4 floors, about 22,000 square feet. We dedicated the first 2 floors of the facility to the manufacturing aspects. That's where the brew house is. That's where all production happens, including canning. The 3rd floor became warehouse space and also the offices for the brewery. And then the top floor, just because of these gorgeous views that we have of the Hudson Valley and specifically the Hudson River, became our tap room. So we started that process in the fall of 2011. We finished the manufacturing facility in March of 2012, so that's when we started producing beer. and we had beer out into the market in April of 2012. So when we talk about our anniversary, we generally celebrate that. In fact, we had our launch party for the brewery on April 19th, 2012, right up the street at the warehouse. So they were the very first place to get any of our beer. Then we opened this part of our business in June of 2012, and we haven't looked back since.
At least in my mind's eye, we're one of the first local areas that I saw crafting into cans as opposed to bottles. Why the decision on bottles versus cans?
So, we should start with just the core set of facts that in every way, a can is better for beer than a bottle. I think years and years of marketing from the big guys, the big domestic breweries, have convinced a lot of consumers that they should be drinking their beer out of a bottle. But in reality, a can is a better vessel for a few reasons. Number one, there's no light filtration. Number two, it's more consumer friendly. Generally speaking, you can bring cans places you can't bring bottles. A can gets colder faster, also more consumer friendly. And cans are more green because they ship a lot cheaper because they are much lighter. They also crush a lot easier. So in every way, again, a can is the better or the more preferred method of packaging for beer. Now, why do we get into canning, and why are most craft breweries into canning now? A lot of it comes from the creation of this type of business called mobile cannings. So we did that for 2 years. They did all the canning for us, but at a certain point, we got to a size and also a demand in the market that was no longer sustainable. I guess in the summer of 2017, we got our own canning line finally. And it's been a huge part of the growth of our business. And that is where we've had the biggest market share improvements, is because of our cans. We've been able to get shelf space in big box retailers like ShopRite and Price Chopper and Whole Foods and Hannaford's and even Rite Aids and things like that. And I think most craft breweries now you see are doing cans as opposed to bottles.
One of the things that I really find interesting is the artistic view on your cans that gives you more of a platform to be able to be artistic. And one of the things I love about your cans, though, is just the structure, the layout, and the look. What's your thought process on the artistic design?
So that's, we love hearing what you just said, because there's a difference between a design and a brand. And when we create our cans, we think about brand. Designs can be cool, and they could be just one-off, and then you put them on the shelf together, and you cannot in any way determine that they're from the same place. As opposed to a brand where, yes, each can is different, but it's very obvious when they're all together, like, oh, these are all from Newburgh Brewing Company. That all comes from our graphic designer, Modern Good Designs. They've been with us since the business plan. They developed our logo, they developed our look, and they developed the aesthetic of our cans. So the first can that we created was our cream ale. Now, the process of creating the cream ale was, we sat down with the designer, his name's Matt, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And we said, well, there's a couple of things that we want you to keep in mind as we're arriving at this aesthetic. Number one, we want bright colors, because we want something that's going to pop on the shelf. We want something when there are 5,000 other cans sitting there, it's going to be, the consumer's eye is going to be drawn to it. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we want it to be unique. So let's do something that isn't being done yet. And number three, and I think this is really vital because I think a lot of craft breweries have gotten away from this in 2019, we wanted to be able to convey actual information to the consumer. We wanted to be able to say, look, these are very important factors we want to get across to you. Number one, we want to tell you what the ABV is. Number two, of course, we want to tell you what the style is. But number three, we also want to give you some actual tasting descriptions of the beer. We want you to understand what you're buying. I think, again, a lot of breweries have gotten away from that you just, the can looks cool, and it's an IPA, let's say, but you don't know anything else about it other than that. Matt came up with this kind of modular look where we have these different boxes, because the second part of that was, we're going to do other beers, so how do we make some kind of standard template where we're just swapping things out?
Right.
And that's what Matt came up with, this kind of, again, this modular look where we have a signature icon in the front. So when it's our cream ale, we call her Betsy the cow. When it's Mega Boss, it's the robot. When it's brown ale, it's the English soldiers. And then you have a description on the bottom that we swap out, and all the other modules can swap out too, and then we can change this color scheme. But at the end of the day, when all the cans are on the shelf together at a store, you look at them and you say, that's from Newburgh Brewing Company.
You're also kind of building something here on the waterfront. You have this tap room here that is a drawing place for a variety of things, whether it's events, individuals coming on a regular basis. You're building a sense of community here, and I think that's important to you.
Extremely important to us. Number one, we didn't name our business Christopher and Paul's Brewery or some other whimsical name. We called it Newburgh Brewing Company because we're proud to be in Newburgh, and we wanted people to immediately know that it's a local product. It's Newburgh Brewing Company. Secondly, it's the entire craft beer movement has been built on the idea of supporting local. It would be disingenuous for us to ask the community to provide that local support and then us not in turn support the community. So in that way, we are very conscious of the idea that, this community supports us by buying our beer, by visiting our tap room. What can we do to give back to the community? Our tap room hosts charity functions. Every single Sunday, we help a local charity raise money where we donate all the cash tips to a charity. A lot of those events do raffles and 50-50s and all kinds of things. We just had one this past Sunday that raised over $9,000 on a Sunday called Food for Kids, which is a local charity. So being community supportive is extremely important, and I think it's not just us, it's the entire industry. The craft beer industry is very supportive of the communities that they dwell in. Craft breweries oftentimes play a big role in helping revitalize a neighborhood, and I think, I'd like to think we've played a small role in helping the continuing revitalization of Newburgh. Dan Brown at the warehouse, he was before us. He played a huge part in creating an anchor on Liberty Street. And now you have us here on Colden Street. You have a already bustling waterfront community. And one thing we've always hoped to be was a bridge between what's going on at the waterfront and what's happening on Liberty Street, because we are directly between those two things. And if maybe some of those people felt more confident opening their business because they saw what was happening here, then that's great, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Talk about maybe your employees a little bit.
You're only as good as your employees, and I think we have some of the best staff in the whole Hudson Valley from two perspectives. Number one, our hospitality staff here in our tap room is more or less run by Melissa Basso, who's our tap room manager. She's fantastic at her job, and she's really assembled a phenomenal staff that work this room for us. Our head chef, Isaac, has been with us for 5 years. We've had bartenders and food runners that have been with us since we opened in 2012. And this is an industry that has a tremendous amount of turnover, and we've been lucky enough to really retain talent. And then on the manufacturing side, Christopher has two phenomenal assistant brewers, one that's been with us for 2 years and one that's been with us for a year. They're both Will and Olivier. They're both great. It's a great question to ask about employees, because people don't understand that a business is only as good as the people that are working there. And again, I just think we have a world-class staff here.